Starting in 1984, an amazing experiment was done to prove that anybody could succeed at trading commodities. A lucky group of people ranging in ages from late teens to early 30s were chosen out of over 1,000 applicants for the chance of a lifetime to be trained by Richard Dennis. The methods they were taught became known as turtle trading, and the students themselves were called turtles. Imagine having a millionaire teach you the secrets to his wealth and allowing you to trade with his money, and the icing on the cake is you get to keep 15% of what you earned. This isn't clickbait, this is a real event that happened back in the 80s that was the result of a discussion between two friends. To understand how amazing this experiment was, you need to first understand the background of Richard Dennis. He came from very humble beginnings, born and raised in a working-class family in Chicago, Illinois on January 9, 1949. Despite having an introverted personality, Richard Dennis, or Rich as family and friends called him, was a natural teacher. Rich loved philosophy so much he decided to pursue a degree in the subject, but at the same time he began to dabble in buying commodities in Chicago at the Mid-America Exchange. At the age of 17 he got a position as a floor runner whose job was to pass along buyer and seller information to the floor trader. Although he was younger than required 21, Rich was able to have his father serve out his buy and sell orders via hand signals in the pits where commodities were sold. Remember, this was the 1970s, long before computers had automated the buying and selling process. These early years were full of losses, often resulting in him losing his full week's paycheck. Still, this is where Rich slowly developed his methods of trading commodities such as soybeans and wheat. In order to trade commodities in the pits of the Mid-America Exchange, Rich had to come up with $1,200 as an entry fee. He just barely had enough money scraped together from family members to pay that fee, leaving him with a measly $400 to trade with. Despite these financial setbacks, by the age of 25 Richard Dennis would become a millionaire, earning him the nickname, Prince of the Pits. Around this time Rich befriended William Eckhardt, a fellow trader who believed that people had to be naturally inclined to trade commodities and couldn't be taught. Although he had dropped out of college by this point, Rich used his philosophical knowledge and began to argue with William Eckhardt over the ability of anyone to learn how to trade commodities. This is how the turtle trading experiment was born, a discussion between two traders who disagreed over nature versus nurture in the world of trading. Imagine seeing an ad in the Wall Street Journal from a famous commodities trader advertising the chance of a lifetime to work for a millionaire and learn his secrets. That is what really happened circa 1983, and it is where all the hype began about turtle trading. One of the criteria that he was looking for in his students was if they played games, and specifically how they handled the risks of those games. People who played games like chess, Risk and even Dungeons and Dragons were chosen because Rich wanted to know how these prospective students would act under pressure. Also, some consideration was given for basic mathematics, as those trading commodities needed to know how to calculate risk and profit. There were well over 1,000 applicants, but initially only about 10 or 13 students were chosen to work for Rich at his company C&D Commodities. Wait, what is turtle trading? Where did the name come from? Well, it came from a trip Rich did to Singapore where he saw turtles being raised quickly and economically on a large scale. From there he essentially thought of his students as being these turtles, and him being the guiding hand that helped them grow. The turtles, as they were known, finally assembled in Chicago to be taught by Richard Dennis in January of 1984. William Eckhardt surprised the turtles by teaching them about how to manage risk on the first day of the 2-week training course on buying and selling commodities. This alarmed the turtles because Rich was absent on the first day and they weren't being taught how to identify commodities to buy, but rather how to minimize and avoid losses. Instead of learning to ride a bike, they were being taught what to do when they fell off the bike. First day jitters aside, Rich would take the remaining days to teach them of following the trends, that is, if a commodity is increasing in price to buy it, and if the commodity is decreasing in price to short it. Shorting is essentially when you bet against a commodity and you profit from having the commodity go down. Another vital lesson taught to the turtles was to eliminate emotional attachment to the commodities they bought. Don't fixate on the price they bought it at, and don't compare the current price to the historical highs or lows of the commodity. In other words, just because the price had never been this high or low doesn't mean it won't ever happen. Now to many people this seems backwards to common logic, where you should buy low and sell high. But Rich rationalized that since you can't predict the market you should take advantage of what was already happening in the market. Due to this belief he felt financial papers like the Wall Street Journal were worthless and that seizing the opportunity in the moment was the key to massive returns. What the Turtles and Richard Dennis needed was an edge. An edge is knowing that if they continue to buy and sell commodities eventually the odds of making a fortune will be tipped into their favor. Obviously, it took the Turtles a while to learn from trial and error how to trade commodities in the way that Richard Dennis did. Rich gave them money out of his own pocket to trade with, in return he took 85% of the profits and let the Turtles keep 15% for themselves. He asked the Turtles to keep a journal of what commodities they were buying and why they bought them. Some of the Turtles claimed they were watched quite closely and that other Turtles were given special treatment. When the Turtles demonstrated that they had mastered the concepts of turtle trading they were given more money to trade with. The majority of the Turtles got $1 million to trade with but Curtis Faith got $2 million to trade with and was suspected of favoritism from Richard Dennis himself. Not all of the time the Turtles spent together in Chicago was used on trading commodities. Without any trend to follow, the market wasn't going up or down meant there was no opportunity for Richard Dennis to take advantage of. The unique strategy used by Richard Dennis meant that the vast majority of the individual trades he placed made little to no profit. Years later when interviewed for the book Market Wizards Rich explained that 95% of his profits have come from 5% of his trades. As one turtle, Ed Kiefer, put it, you can go from -30% down to a plus 150% in 3 weeks, using Rich's trading techniques. This is what caused the downfall of Richard Dennis, because while he could withstand the roller coaster ride of the constant ups and downs of the commodities he traded in, his customers at C&D Commodities could not. Even famous hedge fund manager George Soros, who had invested with Rich, withdrew his $2 million in 1983 because he couldn't grasp the strategies Rich used. George Soros reacted to what essentially was a 2-year stalemate ere those that invested with Rich were hardly making any money in returns. He would later admit that it troubled him to trade for clients because he worried about their money constantly. In April of 1988, Rich had lost over 50% of the invested money he was managing for clients, while his Turtles had only lost 10 to 12%. The fact was that the initial class of Turtles from 1984 did so well that Rich decided to form another class of 10 or so Turtles in 1985 as well. Altogether there was a total of 23 Turtles from both classes that returned on average an 80% return per year. And over the course of 5 years these Turtles had made approximately $175 million. Richard Dennis was struggling around 1988 because of the stock market crash of 1987 and because he ignored his own rules. He let his emotions cloud his judgment when his father died around this time. He also started to risk more than 2% on any trade, something he explicitly had told his Turtles not to do. This is why he ended up losing more money than the Turtles. For his clients he had only achieved a respectable 25% annual return, which was a far cry from the 80% annual return of the Turtles. By 1988 Rich had decided he had enough of enduring the stress of handling commodities investments for clients and decided to pull the plug on his investments and the Turtles. Reflecting on the turtle trading experiment, Richard Dennis called it, "the single best thing I've done in commodities." The Turtles themselves were shocked to see the program end so soon and quickly thought about creating a massive fund run by all the Turtles. But one Turtle, Jerry Parker, decided to go solo and that killed any talk of any collaboration. Jerry Parker was arguably the most successful Turtle and eventually went on to become a billionaire. While Richard Dennis dabbled in politics and in the 90s he traded commodities and formed a third class of Turtles. Check out the next video where Jerry Parker helps to train an aspiring trader and the new Turtles are chosen. The legacy of the Turtles endured for years because they had signed a 5-year non-disclosure agreement with Rich about not revealing the methods they were taught. If you want to learn more you can read the books Way of the Turtle by turtle trader Curtis Faith. Why this tale captivates people to this day is that it proves anyone can make money off of investments if they are simply willing to learn and dedicate themselves to gaining experience. You didn't need to be wealthy or smart to make it in selling commodities or stocks for that matter. Richard Dennis had turned $400 into $200 million and succeeded in training students in his methodology. In fact, the students had surpassed the teacher, making it apparent that a person didn't need to be born with it, as some suggested, but instead only needed the focus and drive to succeed. If you liked the video, please subscribe or leave a comment to help improve the channel.